Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow, deliberate journey back in time, way back to the Edo period in Japan. Picture it now, if you can, the sheer scale of it. You're standing on a slightly dusty, maybe a little muddy street in what will one day become Tokyo. But right now, it's this explosively growing city called Edo. The air isn't exactly fresh. There's the faint, ever-present scent of the Sumida River, mixed with charcoal smoke from countless cooking fires, the distant lowing of an ox pulling a cart, and the general, shall we say, bouquet of a city rapidly expanding with limited modern sanitation. Don't worry, you'll barely notice it after a while. Probably. Let's just say surviving a week here would require more than just historical curiosity. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're tuning in, drop a comment with where you are and what time it is. It's always wild to see how far these whispers travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself dropped into this bustling, slightly chaotic world, a place less than a century old in its current form, but already one of the largest cities on the planet. Edo, the seat of the Tokugawa shogunate, wasn't built slowly and organically over centuries like, say, Kyoto. It was a deliberate project, a strategic move by Tokugawa Ieyasu after his victory at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. He chose this relatively minor fishing village because of its strategic location, easily defensible with hills and mountains behind it, and a vast bay and river system for transport. But building a capital city for a unified Japan, a city that would eventually house over 1 million people, required more than just strategic thinking. It required logistics, it required food, it required building materials, it required stuff. Lots and lots of stuff. And where does stuff get bought and sold? In the markets. The markets weren't just an afterthought in Edo, they were absolutely fundamental to its existence and explosive growth. Think of the human body. The markets were like the circulatory system, pumping essential goods, nourishment, and energy throughout the entire organism. Without efficient ways to feed and supply the hundreds of thousands of samurai, townsmen, chonin, artisans and labourers flooding into the city, the whole grand experiment would have collapsed. The shogunate understood this implicitly. Their control wasn't just about military power or political manoeuvring, it was also about controlling the flow of resources, control the markets, control the city. You look around, and even in what seems like a minor street, there are people hawking things. A woman balancing baskets of freshly picked greens on a pole across her shoulders, calling out her wares. A man sitting on a mat with neatly arranged bundles of kindling. These are the smallest scale, the most informal parts of the vast market network that spiderwebs across Edo. They are the capillaries reaching into every neighbourhood, every alleyway. But the real heart, the major arteries, are the large established markets. These weren't just pop-up street corners, they were designated locations, often granted special privileges or overseen by specific officials. The sheer scale of Edo's population was unprecedented in Japan, and arguably one of the largest urban centres in the world at the time. Keeping 1 million people fed, clothed and housed required a logistical effort that would make Amazon's current operations look like a corner store. Every day, vast quantities of rice, fish, vegetables, timber, textiles and countless other goods needed to arrive, be distributed and be sold. And remember, this was before refrigeration, before highways, before global shipping containers. Everything moved by boat, either along the coast or up the river systems, or by ox cart and human power over the land. It's a wonder anything ever got anywhere on time, let alone in sufficient quantities. Historians still argue whether the shogunate's heavy-handed regulation of the markets was primarily for economic control and taxation, or genuinely aimed at ensuring stability and preventing famine in this massive city. It was probably a bit of both, wasn't it? Like any government anywhere, they liked their cut, but they also had a vested interest in keeping the populace from rioting due to empty bellies. After all, a hungry city is a restless city, and the Tokugawa regime was built on maintaining order. You start to walk, drawn by the general murmur and movement of people. The ground underfoot changes, sometimes packed earth, sometimes rough cobblestones near a larger thoroughfare. The buildings are mostly wooden, 2 stories at most, with tiled or thatched roofs. Paper lanterns hang near doorways, promising light when dusk falls, which, let's be honest, happens inconveniently early in the winter months. This rapid construction meant constant demand for materials, feeding markets specifically for wood, thatch and plaster components. It was a self-sustaining cycle of growth and consumption. One slightly quirky tidbit about the very early days of Edo's expansion was the reliance on human waste as fertilizer known as night soil. While common across Japan, in a city of Edo's size, managing and trading this was a significant, if unpleasant, part of the economy. There were specific routes, specific collectors, and even market prices for the stuff, depending on its quality. Apparently the diet of the contributors mattered. So, as you walk, try not to think too hard about everything you might be smelling or stepping near. Just appreciate the historical authenticity. It adds character, right? Like a fine aged cheese, but significantly less appealing. The initial location of Edo was chosen partly because of its proximity to fishing grounds in the bay and rivers. Fish was, and remains, a cornerstone of the Japanese diet. This explains why one of the very first major markets to develop, and arguably the most important, was the fish market. It wasn't just a place to buy dinner. It was the city's alarm clock, its beating pulse, setting the rhythm for much of the other commercial activity. The freshness of the day's catch was paramount, demanding early morning deliveries and rapid distribution. You can almost hear the shouts of the fishermen and porters even now, echoing across the water from the bay. As you move deeper into the city, you see more signs of specialized commerce. Streets where artisans might be clustered, though the truly concentrated markets are yet to come in our stroll. The sheer variety of goods needed to support 1 million people, from basic food and fuel to luxury silks and imported goods, necessitated a complex network of suppliers, wholesalers, retailers, and street vendors. It was a multi-layered system, a dynamic ecosystem of trade that was constantly adapting, despite the shogunate's best efforts to impose rigid structure and control. The energy is palpable, a low hum of activity that underlies the specific noises of individual transactions. It feels vibrant, alive, maybe a little overwhelming, but definitely the engine room of this colossal city. The murmur and movement intensify as you head towards the undeniable center of Edo's early economic universe. The Nihonbashi area, specifically the fish market situated right near the iconic bridge of the same name. Imagine the cell now, less the general city aroma. More intensely fishy, salty, and maybe a hint of the seaweed being sold alongside the day's catch. This wasn't just a market, it was the beating heart of Edo, dictating the pace for much of the city's life. The fish caught in Edo Bay and the waters further afield needed to reach consumers quickly, and Nihonbashi was the central collection and distribution point. You arrive at the edge of the market area. It's chaos, but a strangely organized chaos. Porters, stripped to the waist despite the chill, heft massive baskets overflowing with silvery fish. Vendors yell out prices and types: sea bream, bonito, mackerel, octopus, prawns, all glistening under the morning sun or the dim light of early dawn, which is when the real action starts. Boats, shallow-drafted and sturdy, are pulled up alongside the market, unloading their precious cargo directly onto the banks or into waiting hands. This proximity to the water was key. It minimized the time and effort required to get the perishable goods from boat to stall. Mainstream historical fact time. The Nihonbashi fish market was officially established quite early in Edo's history, in 1618, though informal fish trade in the area existed before that. It was strategically located not just near the bridge, but also close to Edo Castle, the seat of the shogunate. This was no accident. The shogunate had a massive administrative staff, and more importantly, the castle itself needed to be supplied. The official purveyors to the shogunate, known as goyotashi, often had direct ties to, or operations within the Nihonbashi market, ensuring the ruling class got the freshest sushi ingredients, or, well, whatever they were preparing back then. Probably not sushi as we know it, but you get the idea. Freshness was a status symbol even then. The sheer volume of fish passing through here daily was staggering. Think about 1 million people needing to eat. A significant portion of their protein came from the sea. The market wasn't just for retail, it was a major wholesale hub. Fishermen brought their catches, brokers bought them up, and then various levels of merchants distributed them to smaller markets, restaurants, and individual vendors throughout the city. It was a logistical ballet performed daily before most of Edo had even woken up properly. The noise is incredible. Constant roar of human voices, splashing water, the squawks of opportunistic gulls, even historical ones, and the rhythmic thud of baskets being set down. Navigating the market feels like being swept along in a human tide. You have to watch your step. The ground is wet, slippery, and littered with fish scales and discarded bits. It's not exactly pristine, but the energy is undeniable. People are haggling fiercely, their faces animated. Money changes hands rapidly, mostly small copper coins called mon, but for larger transactions, silver or even gold might be involved. The value of fish fluctuated wildly based on the catch, the season, and even the weather out in the bay. It was a truly dynamic market, driven by supply and demand in its rawest form. Historians still argue whether the fixed locations of major markets like Nihonbashi were more effective at controlling trade and taxation, or if they inadvertently hindered the free flow of goods by limiting options for smaller vendors. It's a classic debate about centralized control versus market efficiency, isn't it? Did the shogunate's regulations make things smoother, or just create more hoops to jump through? Probably depended on whether you were a licensed broker or a guy trying to sell a few fish from a bucket in an alleyway. A slightly quirky or fringe tidbit. Alongside the fish, you'd find vendors selling ice, usually harvested from ponds and lakes during the winter, and stored in ice houses, himuro, for use during the warmer months. This wasn't refrigeration as we know it, but it was essential for preserving the fresh catch for even a few extra hours. Imagine trying to sell fish on a hot Edo summer day without some form of cooling, a smelly nightmare even by historical standards. The ice sellers were key, their product almost as vital as the fish itself. They probably had a slightly less fragrant workspace, which frankly is a win in this environment. The market area is not just stalls. There are also small shops, tea houses, and eateries clustered around its edges, serving the thousands of people who worked here or came to trade. You can smell the inviting aroma of grilled fish or simmering broth mingling with the market's raw scent. These places were essential for fueling the workforce and providing spaces for negotiations and breaks. It was a mini-economy built around the main event, a testament to the market's central role. Look closely at the faces around you. There are seasoned fishmongers with weathered hands, nervous newcomers trying to make a sale, buyers carefully inspecting the quality of the goods, and perhaps even a samurai servant or two, making purchases for their lord's household. This was one of the places where different classes mingled, albeit primarily for the purpose of commerce. A samurai wouldn't likely be doing the shopping himself, of course. That's what retainers were for, unless he was really into picking out his own perfect piece of tuna, which, maybe? Probably not. The sheer scale of the operation is mind-boggling. Think about the boats coming in, the fish being unloaded, sorted, sold, packed, and then transported across the city, all within a few hours to ensure maximum freshness. And this happened every single day. Rain or shine, unless a typhoon was literally blowing the market away. It required incredible coordination and a deep understanding of the tides, the fishing grounds, and the logistics of urban distribution in a pre-industrial age. It makes your local supermarket supply chain seem like a leisurely Sunday stroll. You see specialized areas even within the chaos. Some vendors focus on shellfish, others on dried fish, a crucial staple that lasted longer, and still others on processing, gutting, cleaning, and preparing fish for sale or transport. There are also vendors selling equipment, nets, hooks, baskets, knives. It was a complete ecosystem. The scraps and waste weren't necessarily wasted either. They might be used for fertilizer, remember that? Or processed into other products. Nothing was left to chance, or at least every part of the fish was leveraged for value in some way. Stepping back slightly from the most crowded areas, you can appreciate the network spreading out. Porters carrying baskets disappear down side streets, carts are loaded, and the flow of fish moves away from Nihonbashi, dispersing throughout the city like ripples from a stone thrown into a pond. This is the initial push, the main artery pumping lifeblood into the rest of Edo's marketplaces. It's a powerful image, a testament to the vital role this single location played in sustaining the urban giant. The energy, the smells, the sounds, they are overwhelming but paint a vivid picture of a city driven by the fundamental need to feed itself. Leaving the intense, fishy energy of Nihonbashi behind, you push inland a bit, navigating the increasingly crowded streets. The character of the city subtly shifts. The air still hums with activity, but the dominant smell transitions from brine and fresh catch to something earthier, maybe a hint of charcoal smoke, dried herbs, or the faint scent of ink and paper. Your destination now is the Kanda district, an area historically known for a much broader spectrum of goods and a different kind of market atmosphere. If Nihonbashi was the city's stomach, processing the raw ingredients, Kanda felt more like its toolbox, its study, and maybe its slightly cluttered attic. The streets here feel a little less frantic than the immediate waterfront. While still bustling, the pace seems more deliberate, perhaps reflecting the nature of the goods being traded. You see workshops tucked away behind market stalls, the sounds of hammers, saws, or maybe even looms faintly audible. This wasn't just a place to buy things, it was often where they were made, or at least where the materials were gathered. It's like walking through an historical Amazon fulfillment center, but instead of massive warehouses, it's a sprawl of smaller, specialized shops and open-air stalls. Mainstream historical fact unlocked. Kanda was renowned for its concentration of specialized trades and goods, particularly in the later Edo period. It wasn't a single monolithic market like Nihonbashi, but rather a collection of streets and alleys where specific types of vendors congregated. Areas specialized in selling lumber, metal goods, paper, books, medicines, clothing materials, and tools of every description. If you needed something beyond your daily bread, or rather rice, and fish, Kanda was often the place you'd head. It was the hardware store, the stationery shop, the pharmacy, and the bookstore all rolled into one sprawling district. As you wander deeper into Kanda, the visual landscape changes. Instead of piles of glittering fish, you see stacks of neatly bundled wood, rolls of vibrant fabrics, shelves lined with ceramic pots, and vendors meticulously arranging sets of gardening tools. The noise is different too, less shouting, more the steady drone of conversation, the occasional ring of metal on metal, or the rustle of paper. It feels a bit more organized. Less like a feeding frenzy, more like browsing, though browsing still involved navigating crowds, of course. You can't escape the crowds in Edo, remember that? It's like a permanent convention, but everyone's just trying to buy a hammer. You pass stalls selling writing brushes and inkstones, essential tools for the vast administrative class and growing literate population of Edo. Nearby, someone is displaying beautiful lengths of dyed cloth, indigo blues, deep reds, subtle greens. Further on, the smell of dried herbs and something medicinal hangs in the air from a pharmacist's stall. You might even spot a travelling dentist advertising tooth-pulling services. You probably don't want to stop there, unless you brought 17th century dental insurance. Which, spoiler alert, you didn't. One quirky or fringe tidbit about Kanda. This district was also a significant centre for second-hand goods. Because paper was relatively expensive, especially quality paper, there was a thriving market for recycled paper and old documents. Scribes and scholars might visit stalls selling salvaged paper to practice calligraphy or take notes, and less scrupulous types might even be looking for discarded official documents, though that was probably frowned upon, you'd imagine. It was an early form of recycling driven by necessity and value, turning yesterday's waste into today's slightly less than new resource. Historians still argue whether the concentration of specific trades in distinct areas like Kanda evolved organically from existing clusters of workshops and vendors, or if it was a result of deliberate urban planning and regulation by the shogunate or the city authorities. Was it bottom-up convenience or top-down control? It's a question that echoes through the history of many large cities, isn't it? Did people just naturally flock together if they sold similar things, or did someone in the power say, right, all the tool guys go here, all the paper people go over there? Probably a bit of both, let's be honest. Bureaucracy loves a bit of clustering. The markets in Kanda catered to a diverse clientele. Samurai and their retainers would come here for goods not provided by their domain's own production. Wealthy merchants and townsfolk would seek out fine fabrics, luxury tools, or decorative items. Artisans would buy raw materials. The average Edoko, resident of Edo, would come for everyday necessities like paper, simple tools, or medicinal herbs. It was a cross-section of the city, each person looking for something specific amidst the general abundance. Think about the scale of goods needed. A city of 1 million people required enormous quantities of everything. Wood for building and fuel, paper for writing and packaging, tools for every trade imaginable, medicines to treat illnesses, clothing for everyone from the shogun to the lowest labourer. Kanda was a key node in this massive supply chain, drawing goods from the surrounding countryside and even further afield, processing them and distributing them throughout the city. It was a logistical challenge that seems almost insurmountable today, managed with handcarts, human porters, and perhaps the occasional ox-drawn cart. No forklifts here, not even the historical equivalent of a slightly shaky-wheeled trolley. The atmosphere feels different again. While Nihonbashi was noisy and smelly with the urgency of perishable goods, Kanda is perhaps a bit more sedate, more specialized. You might hear the quiet, focused discussion between a craftsman and a merchant, or the patient explanations of a herbalist describing the properties of different plants. There's still haggling, of course. This is a market, after all. But maybe it's done with a slightly lower decibel level, a little less frantic energy. It's the difference between a fish auction and a specialized trade fair. You might even stumble upon a small stall selling maps or guidebooks of Edo. Given the city's confusing layout, fires meant it was constantly being rebuilt and reconfigured, a map wasn't just a tourist curiosity, it was a practical necessity. Imagine trying to navigate this place without Google Maps. Utter nightmare. You'd be lost in an alley selling antique rice cookers before you knew it. The diversity of Kanda's offerings reflects the complexity of Edo as a society. It wasn't just a collection of consumers, it was a city of makers, thinkers, healers, and administrators, all requiring specific materials and tools for their livelihoods and daily lives. The markets here weren't just about feeding people. They were about equipping them, housing them, clothing them, and even educating them via the book and paper sellers. It was a physical manifestation of the city's diverse economic and social fabric. As you continue your slow stroll through this area, the sheer variety is what truly stands out. One moment you're looking at meticulously crafted ceramic bowls, the next you're examining bundles of dried seaweed. Yes, some food items still pop up, but less dominantly. Then a pile of discarded ropes, ready to be repurposed. It's a place of incredible detail and specialization, a stark contrast to the more primal, urgent commerce of the fish market. This isn't just about sustenance. It's about the tools and the materials that build a city and sustain a complex way of life. Continuing your gentle amble, the streets you now traverse feel different again. You've left the concentrated specialization of Kanda, the smell of wood and paper fading behind you. The air here is perhaps a little sweeter, maybe carrying the scent of incense, or perhaps something cooked, like roasted sweet potatoes or grilled mochi. The buildings feel less like workshops and more like storefronts, with open fronts displaying finished goods rather than raw materials. You might be drifting towards areas like Honjo or Nihonbashi proper's retail sections, places where the fruits of the city's diverse economy were put on display for the burgeoning consumer class. This is where the average Edoko did a significant portion of their daily shopping for things they didn't make themselves. Think of it less like a single massive market square and more like a series of bustling shopping streets, each with its own character, lined with vendors selling everything from ready-to-wear kimonos, though most people still made their own or had them custom-made, simpler ones were available, to everyday household items, ceramics, kitchenware, and small luxuries. It's like wandering down a vibrant, slightly chaotic historical high street. The sounds here are a lively blend, the calls of vendors advertising their wares, the chatter of shoppers, perhaps the distant twang of a shamisen, or the rhythmic beat of a drum from a nearby entertainment district. It's a constant, low hum of urban life overlaid with sharper bursts of sound. You see people haggling over prices, friends meeting for a chat, children darting between legs. The energy feels less intensely commercial than Nihonbashi's early morning rush, and less focused than Kanda's specialized trade. It's more about the everyday ebb and flow of people acquiring the things they need, and perhaps a few things they just want. Mainstream historical fact unlocked. Edo's population, especially the chonin, townspeople, class, developed a sophisticated consumer culture during the Edo period. As the city grew and wealth concentrated, there was an increasing demand for a wide variety of goods, leading to the growth of specialized retail shops and areas catering to different tastes and budgets. This period saw the rise of brands, advertising in the form of shop signs and flyers, and even rudimentary forms of department stores or large retail complexes. People cared about fashion, home decor, and leisure goods, driving a significant part of the economy beyond mere subsistence. You might pause to admire a display of ceramic bowls and plates, noticing the different styles and glazes. Some are simple and sturdy for everyday use, while others are finely crafted and beautifully decorated, clearly intended for wealthier households. Nearby, a vendor might be selling wooden combs and hairpins, essential accessories in an era when hairstyles were elaborate and important. Or perhaps you see stalls piled high with straw sandals, waraji and zori, the everyday footwear of the vast majority of the population. You probably don't want to think too hard about how often they were changed. Let's just say modern shoe sanitation has come a long way. One quirky or fringe tidbit. Among the many specialized shops were those selling ready-made small items for festivals or specific occasions. For example, you might find vendors specializing solely in the paper decorations used for Tanabata, or the dolls for Hinamatsuri. This level of hyper-specialization, even for seasonal or fleeting goods, indicates the depth and breadth of the Edo market and the willingness of entrepreneurs to cater to even niche demands. It's like finding a store that only sells inflatable pool flamingos. Slightly baffling, but clearly there's a market for it somewhere. Historians still argue whether the Edo period's vibrant consumer culture was a sign of widespread prosperity among the chonin class, or if it primarily benefited a wealthy elite, while the majority struggled with basic necessities. Were these markets places of general abundance accessible to many, or were they primarily serving the top tier of society, with only scraps available for the rest? It's a debate about economic inequality and the distribution of wealth in a rapidly growing urban centre. Was it retail therapy for the few, or essential shopping for the many? Probably a mix, right? Life is usually a mix of extremes. As you move along, you might notice shops dedicated entirely to selling fans, both the folding kind and the flat ones. Fans were not just fashion accessories, but practical necessities in Edo's hot, humid summers. They were also used in various traditional arts, from dance to storytelling. The variety on display would be immense, from simple paper fans to elaborately painted ones made with silk or special woods. It makes you appreciate the simple elegance and utility of something we now often only think of as decorative. Imagine the sheer volume of fans needed for a million-person city to survive July. It boggles the mind. The sheer density of the city is apparent here. Streets are often narrow, packed with people, vendors pushing carts, and perhaps someone carrying a large load balanced on their shoulder. You have to constantly watch where you're going, stepping aside to let others pass, avoiding puddles of questionable origin, let's be honest, and keeping an eye on your belongings. It's not a place for absent-minded wandering. You have to be present in the moment, which is kind of the opposite of what we're trying to do right now, isn't it? Ah well, let's just keep drifting through the description, shall we? You might see a vendor selling small, inexpensive toys for children, spinning tops, paper kites, wooden dolls. These simple pleasures offered a bit of joy in lives that could be quite hard. The existence of a market for such non-essential items speaks volumes about the development of leisure and childhood as distinct concepts, even for the less wealthy classes. Or maybe parents were just desperate for 5 minutes of peace, same as today. Probably that. The smell of different foods might start to intrude here, though this isn't a dedicated food market like Nihonbashi. Street food vendors were common throughout Edo's commercial districts, offering quick hot meals like skewers of grilled meat or fish, bowls of noodles or sweet treats. These provided sustenance for shoppers and workers, and added another layer to the sensory tapestry of the streets. Imagine grabbing a quick, cheap bite while browsing for new sandals. It's the historical equivalent of hitting up a food truck outside a department store. The pace here might feel a little less urgent than the wholesale markets. People are browsing, chatting, taking their time. It's a social space as much as a commercial one. You see groups of women shopping together, men discussing the quality of tools or materials, families out for a stroll. The market is integrated into the rhythm of daily life, a place not just for transactions, but for interaction and community. It's where news was exchanged, gossip was spread, and the pulse of the city could be felt most strongly. As you continue your slow drift through this part of Edo, notice the details, the intricate carvings on a wooden sign, the vibrant colours of the fabrics, the worn surfaces of the cobblestones, or dirt paths more likely, underfoot. Each stall, each shop is a tiny microcosm of Edo's economy and society, a testament to the ingenuity and hard work of the people who made this city function. It's a busy, noisy, colourful world, constantly shifting and evolving, much like the city itself. But for now, just let the sounds and smells wash over you, a gentle current in the slow river of Edo's markets. The air begins to shift again as you turn a corner, the faint smell of incense and cooking food from the general retail area giving way to something else entirely. It's a tang of salt, a hint of decay, and the undeniable pervasive scent of fish. You're not arriving at the Nihonbashi fish market during its chaotic pre-dawn peak, thank goodness. That would be far too stimulating for our purposes. Instead, you've wandered into the aftermath hours later, after the bulk of the day's catch has been sold and dispersed throughout the city. Imagine the scene. The temporary stalls are being dismantled or cleaned. The main trading area is less a crush of bodies and more a scattered landscape of wooden crates, discarded ice, or what passed for ice in those days, likely hauled from frozen lakes in winter and stored in ice houses, and the unavoidable detritus of a massive seafood operation. The ground is wet, probably from splashing water used for cleaning, but maybe also from melting ice and other less pleasant liquids you'd rather not dwell on. Tread carefully. The sounds here are different too. Gone are the shouting vendors and the frantic energy. Now it's the scraping of brushes on wood, the splash of water buckets, the low murmur of people engaged in cleanup and sorting. You might hear the cries of gulls. Yes, even inland cities like Edo had birds drawn by the promise of scraps. It's a scene of winding down, the commercial high having long passed, leaving behind the necessary, often grimy work of tidying up. It's like seeing the kitchen after a huge banquet. The glamour is gone, replaced by elbow grease. Mainstream historical fact unlocked. The Nihonbashi fish market was the single most important market in Edo, and arguably the most vital hub for distributing protein to the city's massive population. It began informally early in the Edo period, supplying the shogun's castle, but quickly grew into a colossal wholesale operation handling vast quantities of fish and seafood caught in Edo Bay and beyond. Its sheer scale was a testament to the city's growth and its reliance on maritime resources. The market operated on a tight schedule, with the morning auction and wholesale being the main event, followed by distribution and then, of course, the less glamorous cleanup. You watch as workers, often apprentices or lower status labourers, hose down, or rather bucket and splash down, wooden planks and crates, trying to wash away the sticky residue and scales. The air is still thick with the smell, somehow more potent now that it's less masked by the sheer volume of fresh product and the crowds. It's the smell of fish that has been handled, walked, or cut and processed. A smell that clings stubbornly to everything it touches. You get the feeling these workers probably smelled like this all the time, a permanent aura of the sea, and maybe a hint of regret. One quirky or fringe tidbit. While the main catch was sold for consumption, certain byproducts found their way into surprising uses. Fish oil, for instance, was used for lamps, and fish guts could be processed into fertilizer. Even seemingly useless parts were sometimes utilized, reflecting a culture where waste was minimized out of necessity. It's the original reduce, reuse, recycle, but probably less about saving the planet and more about saving a few yen by turning trash into slightly less appealing treasure. Imagine rendering down fish heads for lamp oil. Cozy. Historians still argue whether the location of the Nihonbashi market, dumping much of its waste directly into the waterways that crisscross the city, had a significant detrimental impact on the health of Edo's residents or the quality of the water they relied upon for other purposes. While sanitation was generally rudimentary by modern standards, the concentration of organic waste from the market in the central canal must have posed challenges. Was the convenience of the location worth the environmental cost, even if they weren't thinking of it in those terms? It's a debate about urban planning and public health in a rapidly industrializing, in its own way, pre-modern city. As you stroll along the edges of the market area, you might see smaller, more makeshift operations setting up. These could be vendors who bought cheaper, perhaps lower quality fish during the main auction, now trying to sell it retail to smaller customers, or even people sifting through discarded parts for anything salvageable. It's a different economy operating in the shadow of the main event, a scavenging lair ensuring that absolutely nothing goes to waste in a city of a million mouths. It's a reminder that for many, the market wasn't just about buying the finest tuna, but about finding anything edible at all. You might spot stray cats or dogs slinking around, eyeing the cleanup efforts with hopeful or perhaps resigned expressions. Life was tough for animals in the city too, and the market aftermath would have been a key foraging ground. Don't pet them, seriously, just don't, unless you fancy a trip to a historical equivalent of the vet, which I assure you, you absolutely do not. The sounds of cleaning continue, the swish of brooms made of straw or reeds, the rhythmic thud of buckets, maybe the distant calls of people coordinating their work. The smell somehow seems to be intensifying now that the cooler morning air is warming up. You might want to subtly hold your breath, or perhaps pretend you suddenly find the fascinating history of historical sanitation utterly absorbing, distracting yourself with intellectual pursuits rather than olfactory ones. Good luck with that. It's easy to romanticize historical markets, thinking only of the vibrant trade and exotic goods, but there was a gritty reality too, the back-end processes required to make it all function. The cleanup of the fish market is a prime example. The mess, the smell, the hard labour involved in processing such enormous quantities of perishable goods day after day. It's the unglamorous but essential foundation upon which the city's culinary reputation was built. Without the people doing this dirty work, the fresh sushi, well, fermented fish initially, but you get the idea, wouldn't make it to the dinner table. Perhaps you see a group of workers taking a break, sitting on upturned crates, sharing a simple meal of rice and pickles. They are the invisible gears in the market machine, the ones who ensure that tomorrow morning the cycle can begin anew. Their conversation is probably about the day's sales, the difficulty of the cleanup, or maybe just the aching in their backs. They are part of the living history of the market as much as the wealthy merchants who made fortunes here. As you slowly drift away from the immediate vicinity of the market's core, the intensity of the fish smell might lessen slightly, mixing again with other city scents. But it lingers, a reminder of the sheer scale and biological reality of feeding a metropolis. It's a scent that was fundamental to the identity of this part of Edo, a sensory marker that you are near the heart of its economic engine. You carry a faint whiff of it with you as you move towards the next district, a little souvenir you didn't ask for. As you leave the lingering scent of the fish market behind, seriously, a deep breath might be a good idea, even if it's just symbolic. You start to notice the market landscape shifting again. The chaotic energy of the open-air fish trade gives way to something a bit more structured, a bit more deliberate. You're entering the realm of the specialty streets, areas where specific types of goods or crafts were concentrated, creating mini-districts dedicated to everything from fine textiles to durable tools. Think of it like wandering through a modern shopping mall. But instead of department stores, you have entire streets lined with shops selling only, say, artisanal chopsticks, or exclusively indigo-dyed fabric, or perhaps just different kinds of paper. It's hyper-specialization, Edo style. You don't just find a shop that sells stuff, you find the street for brushes, or the lane for tatami mats. It's less about variety under one roof and more about variety within one very specific category, spread out along a street. It makes finding what you need incredibly efficient, assuming you know which street to go to. If not, well, I hope you brought comfortable historical sandals. You turn onto a street where the dominant visual is the rich, deep blues of indigo. Bolts of cloth are stacked high, some hanging outside shops, swaying gently in the breeze. The colour is everywhere, from light sky blue to an almost black inky hue. This is likely a street known for its cotton and hemp textiles, particularly those dyed with indigo, a common and durable dye. The air here has a different smell, less fishy, thank goodness, but perhaps a faint, earthy scent of the dye itself, maybe mixed with the clean smell of new fabric. The shops here are more permanent structures than the temporary stalls of the fish market. They have proper roofs, sliding doors, and often raised wooden floors. Inside, you can glimpse weavers working on looms, dyers stirring vats, or clerks carefully folding finished cloth. There's a sense of quiet industry, a contrast to the boisterous energy of the more general markets. The transactions here might be slower, more considered, especially if you're buying a large amount or commissioning something specific. Mainstream historical fact unlocked. Edo was renowned for its specialized craft and merchant districts. These areas were often grouped based on the type of goods produced or sold, sometimes due to historical ties, sometimes for practical reasons like shared resources or waste disposal, and often influenced by the system of guilds or associations, known as nakama, that regulated many trades. These nakama controlled production quality, prices and membership, providing stability and also, let's be honest, probably stifling a bit of competition. It's a bit like a historical cartel, but for things like making really good brooms or selling excellent tea. As you walk down the textile street, you might see signs painted with symbols representing different types of fabric or patterns. You might notice that the shops, while selling similar goods, still have their own distinct feel. One might cater to commoners, selling sturdy, everyday cottons, while another might offer finer silks or more elaborate patterns for wealthier clients. The social stratification of Edo is reflected even in the types of textiles available on different parts of the same street. Trying to haggle over fine silk when you look like you just survived the fish market cleanup might not go over well. One quirky or fringe tidbit. Some specialty streets developed reputations not just for their main product, but for the specific associated smells, sounds, or even the characters of the people who worked there. The street for incense makers, for example, would have been intensely fragrant. The street for sword polishers might have the rhythmic rasp of whetstones. And the people, well, picture the intense focus of a craftsman versus the smooth talk of a textile merchant. Each street had its own little subculture. It's like finding the hipster coffee shop street versus the traditional bakery street in your own town, except with more samurais potentially walking by. Historians still argue whether the concentration of certain trades into specific districts was primarily a result of shogunate policy aimed at control and taxation, or if it was a more organic development driven by the tradespeople themselves for mutual support, skill sharing, and collective bargaining power. Was it top-down regulation or bottom-up community building? Probably a bit of both, as with most complex historical phenomena. But it's fun to imagine whether the government forced all the umbrella makers together, or if they just decided, hey, our street smells like wet paper and bamboo, let's stick together. You might wander onto another street known for, say, tools and hardware. Here the sounds are different. The clang of hammers, the whirring of wheels, the sharp smell of metal and perhaps wood smoke from a forge. You see rows of sickles, hoes, saws, knives, and all manner of implements hanging outside shops or displayed neatly within. These aren't just for farmers. Edo was a city of builders, craftsmen and labourers who needed quality tools. A good chisel or a sharp plane could mean the difference between a living wage and struggling. The tools on display aren't necessarily fancy, but they look durable and well made. You can appreciate the craftsmanship that went into them. Perhaps you see a blacksmith working in an open front shop, the heat from the forge radiating outwards, his muscles defined by years of swinging a hammer. The sheer physical labour involved in crafting these essential items is on full display. It's a reminder that for all the talk of merchants and goods, the foundation of the economy was skilled manual labour. The street might smell faintly of iron and coal smoke mixed with the sawdust from nearby woodworking shops. There's a practical no-nonsense atmosphere here. Transactions are probably more straightforward. You need a hammer, you look at the hammers, you pay the price, you leave. Not much room for lengthy negotiation when you just need to fix your roof before the next rain. Unless you try to argue that the hammer is last season, which I doubt would work out well for you. Imagine a shop specialising in paper. Not just any paper, but specific types for writing, painting, folding, or even insulating. The smell here would be faint but distinct, the texture of the various papers offering a tactile experience. You might see delicate screens being made, paper lanterns assembled, or sheets of calligraphy paper being carefully dried. It's a quieter street maybe, one focused on finer details and lighter materials. You'd need a steady hand and a calm disposition to work here, unlike the hustle of the fish market or the banging of the tool street. The varieties within these specialty districts is fascinating. Even on a street selling only ceramics, you'd find shops specialising in different types. Everyday earthenware, fine porcelain for tea ceremonies, decorative tiles. It's a level of granular detail that speaks to the complexity of Edo's economy and the specific needs and tastes of its huge, diverse population. Trying to catalogue every type of shop would probably take you longer than this entire bedtime story, which, given the goal, is saying something. As you continue your slow stroll, appreciating the distinct atmosphere of each street, the quiet concentration of the paper makers, the rhythmic sounds of the tool makers, the visual feast of the textile shops, you start to see how the city is a mosaic of these smaller, specialised worlds. They're interconnected, of course. The toolmakers need food from the markets, the textile dyers need water, everyone needs paper for records and communication. But each area maintains its own identity, its own pace, its own unique contribution to the vast humming ecosystem of Edo. It's a testament to human ingenuity and the tendency to cluster together based on shared interests and skills, whether it's selling fish or crafting the perfect writing brush. And you're just drifting through it all, one sleepy observer in a whirlwind of historical commerce. Leaving the relative calm and focused purpose of the specialty craft streets, you drift into a different kind of energy. The air changes again, becoming thicker with a mix of competing aromas, sweet pastries, simmering broth, maybe even something frying in oil. The sounds are less rhythmic clang of hammers and more a general hubbub of chatter, laughter, and perhaps the twang of a shamisen or the voice of a storyteller. You've stumbled towards the more informal, more ephemeral parts of the Edo market landscape, the areas often clustered near entertainment districts or major thoroughfares, where quick eats, cheap goods, and instant gratification are the order of the day. Think of this as moving from the permanent retail stores to the food truck park and street performer corner. It's less about acquiring a tool that will last a lifetime or fabric for a wedding kimono, and more about satisfying an immediate craving, finding a small diversion, or picking up a cheap print to decorate your humble dwelling. It's the pulse of Edo's everyday popular culture manifesting itself right here on the street, readily accessible to anyone with a few coins in their pocket. Stalls appear more temporary here, many just simple frames covered with cloth or perhaps small wheeled carts. People are milling about, snacking as they walk, stopping to listen to someone speaking or watching a simple performance. The pace is quicker, perhaps a little more chaotic than the specialty streets, but also perhaps a bit more genuinely joyful. Nobody seems to be intensely negotiating over the price of a hammer here. They're just deciding whether to get the udon or the soba, relatable problems even across centuries. You see vendors hawking all sorts of prepared foods. Sushi, though maybe not the delicate nigiri style you know, Edo, sushi was often fermented or pressed, might be available alongside grilled skewers of meat or fish, steaming bowls of noodles, and endless varieties of sweets made from rice flour and bean paste. The smells are intoxicating, a direct assault on the senses after the more subtle fragrances of textiles or paper. You might be tempted to try something, but you're just a historical observer, so you have to experience it vicariously, which is probably better for your digestive system anyway, given the lack of modern hygiene standards. Mainstream historical fact alert. Edo was a city with a thriving street food culture, largely due to its massive transient population of single men, samurai on duty, labourers, etc., who didn't have wives or families to cook for them. These quick, ready-to-eat meals provided sustenance and became an integral part of the market experience. Tempura, soba, and early forms of sushi were all popular street foods. It was the original grab-and-go, just without the questionable plastic packaging. As you navigate through the crowds gathered around food stalls, you might notice other vendors selling small, inexpensive items, trinkets, cheap fans, paper toys, simple hairpins, or lucky charms. These are impulse buys, little bits of joy or utility that didn't warrant a dedicated shop but found a market here amidst the hustle and bustle. It's the equivalent of the checkout aisle candy or the display of cheap gadgets near the entrance of a modern store, designed to catch your eye when your guard is down, perhaps after you've just enjoyed a delicious, historically questionable snack. And then you see them, stacks of colourful prints, often laid out on mats or hanging from ropes. These are ukiyo-e, pictures of the floating world. They depict scenes of everyday Edo life, beautiful courtesans, famous kabuki actors, sumo wrestlers, landscapes, and sometimes even historical or mythological scenes. The colours are vibrant, though often derived from natural dyes, meaning they could fade over time. They are affordable art for the masses, a way for ordinary people to bring images of beauty, excitement, or famous figures into their homes. A quirky or fringe tidbit. While many ukiyo-e depicted idealized beauty or famous figures, a significant portion also served as advertisements or visual news. Prints were made showing the latest kabuki plays, popular restaurants, or even sensational events like fires or crimes. They were the billboards and tabloids of Edo, just rendered with artistic flair. Imagine getting your daily news from a beautifully woodblock printed image of a famous actor playing a dramatic role, beats scrolling through doom scrolling, right? Historians still argue whether the primary appeal of ukiyo-e for commoners was purely aesthetic appreciation, a form of escapism into the glamorous floating world of the pleasure districts and theatre, or if they served a more practical purpose as educational tools or social commentary, albeit often subtly conveyed. Were people buying them just because they looked pretty, or because they offered a glimpse into a world they couldn't access, or even because they were commenting on current events? It's probably a mix, depending on the print and the person, but it tells you something about how art functioned in this vibrant city. You might see a street performer attracting a crowd, perhaps a rakugo storyteller, captivating listeners with a comedic or dramatic monologue, using only a fan and a hand towel as props, or maybe a musician playing a lively tune, their instrument adding to the general din. These performers are part of the market ecosystem too, drawing people in, providing entertainment, and hopefully collecting a few coins for their efforts. It's live entertainment and folks available right there on the sidewalk. No ticket required, though a donation is always appreciated, then as now. The atmosphere here is less about the serious business of essential trade and more about leisure, consumption, and enjoyment. It's where people might linger, chat with friends, watch the world go by, and simply soak in the unique atmosphere of Edo. It's noisy, it's crowded, and it's probably a bit smelly, those food stalls, remember? But it's undeniably alive. As you weave through the crowds, careful not to bump into someone carrying a tray of steaming dango, or knock over a stack of ukiyo-e prints. That would be an awkward conversation, especially given the language barrier, and the whole being a ghost thing. You get a sense of the sheer density of life and activity in this part of the city. It's a world away from the quiet, focused work of the toolmakers or the strategic positioning of the rice merchants. This is the pulse of popular Edo, vibrant and ever-changing, fueled by appetite, entertainment, and the simple desire for a small piece of beauty or a moment of diversion in a busy life. It's a reminder that even in a structured society like Edo, there was always room for spontaneity and the pursuit of simple pleasures, often found right here in the bustling markets, and you're just passing through, a silent witness to this fleeting moment of historical enjoyment. Moving away from the vibrant, sometimes chaotic energy of the entertainment and quick food areas, the air begins to change again. It becomes cooler, perhaps a little damp, and takes on a distinctly intensely saline aroma. You're no longer smelling simmering broth or sweet pastries. This is the sharp, unmistakable scent of the sea, of fresh catch laid out in abundance. You found your way towards one of Edo's most vital and impressive hubs, the fish market. This isn't a few guys selling fish from baskets on the street corner. This is a sprawling, organised, or perhaps semi-organised, depending on the hour, operation. Imagine acres of space dedicated to the bounty pulled from the waters around Japan. Boats would arrive here constantly, bringing their catch directly to the market area along the waterways that crisscross the city. The sheer volume is staggering. Piles of glistening fish, various shades of silver, grey and red, are laid out on mats or in baskets. Shellfish, octopus, squid, seaweed. If it came from the water, you'd likely find it here. The sounds here are different too. Less chatter, more purposeful noise, the thud of fish being unloaded, the rhythmic scrape of knives scaling or preparing fish, the calls of vendors, the quick clipped language of negotiation. It's a world of focused activity, often starting well before dawn to ensure the city's countless kitchens, from the grandest samurai mansion to the humblest street stall, had fresh ingredients for the day. Stepping into this market area feels like entering the engine room of Edo's culinary life. Mainstream historical fact, the fish market of Edo, particularly the one in Nihonbashi, which was the direct ancestor of the famous Tsukiji and now Toyosu markets, was one of the largest and most important wholesale markets in the city. Its location near the harbour and riverways facilitated the rapid distribution of fresh seafood to a massive urban population that relied heavily on fish as a protein source. It was the original distribution centre, just way smellier and with more flapping. The scale is hard to comprehend. How did they manage to handle, process, and distribute so much perishable product without modern refrigeration? Well, they didn't have refrigeration, but they had ice houses, often located in specific areas or on private estates, where ice harvested in winter could be stored underground, packed in straw and earth, and used sparingly to preserve particularly valuable or sensitive goods. Still, rapid consumption was key. Fish caught in the morning needed to be on a plate by evening. This immediacy shaped much of Edo's food culture, including the rise of quick, prepared dishes like early forms of sushi and grilled fish sold on the street. You see workers, their clothes stained and damp, moving with practiced efficiency. They handle fish with incredible speed, sorting, cleaning, and preparing it for sale to retailers or restaurants, who would then carry it to their own establishments across the city. The energy is palpable. This isn't a leisurely stroll. This is commerce happening at a breakneck pace, driven by the ticking clock of spoilage. A quirky or fringe tidbit. To keep the massive amounts of fish somewhat cool, especially in warmer months, vendors and workers sometimes used well water, which was naturally cooler than the surface temperature. While not as effective as ice, it helped extend the freshness window slightly. Some records also suggest specialized water carts that would sprinkle water over fish displays. It was low-tech but necessary innovation in a pre-refrigeration world. Survival ingenuity at its finest, even if it just bought you an extra hour or two before things got truly dodgy. Historians still argue whether the organizational structure of the Edo fish market was primarily driven by top-down government regulations aiming to control prices and supply, or if it evolved more organically from the bottom-up needs and practices of the fishermen, wholesalers, and retailers themselves. Was it centrally planned chaos, or self-organized entropy? The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, a complex interplay of official policy and informal tradition that allowed this enormous, vital operation to function. Beyond the fish, you might find markets for other perishables nearby, mountains of vegetables, baskets of fruit, maybe even some poultry or game. Though fish was king in Edo, these markets also operated on tight schedules, receiving goods from the surrounding countryside via boat or cart, ensuring the city was constantly supplied with fresh produce. The logistics of feeding a city of over 1 million people in the 17th and 18th centuries were mind-boggling, a testament to the efficiency and sometimes sheer grit of its merchants and labourers. As you watch the transactions unfold, the quick hand signals, the rapid exchange of coins, you appreciate the foundational role this market played. This wasn't just a place to buy food, it was a massive economic engine, employing thousands, supporting countless others involved in transport, processing and retail. It was a world unto itself, governed by its own customs and rhythms, largely dictated by the rising and setting of the sun and the delicate dance of supply and demand with highly perishable goods. It makes your modern grocery store run feel like a walk in the park, doesn't it? No refrigeration aisle here, just hope and rapid turnover. The smell, though intense, isn't necessarily unpleasant if you appreciate the scent of the sea. It's a working smell, the aroma of labour and sustenance. But linger too long and you might start to feel a little queasy. Depot hygiene standards, as mentioned before, weren't quite what you're used to. Best to admire the spectacle, the sheer volume, the focused energy, and move on before you have to consult a historical physician about a sudden onset of historical indigestion. It's a vivid reminder that for all the beauty and culture of Edo, life was often messy, demanding, and frankly a little bit smelly. And this market, more than many other areas, encapsulated that reality. Leaving the potent, briny energy of the fish market behind, you find the air gradually sweetening, shifting again. The calls of vendors become less about the price per kilo and more about the properties of dried roots and powdered substances. You're moving into areas where health and well-being, as understood in Edo times, were traded. These are the medicine and pharmacy stalls, often clustered together, creating a fascinating, sometimes unsettling sensory experience. The smell is complex, a mix of earthy herbs, bitter roots, pungent spices, and sometimes, frankly, things you really don't want to identify. Imagine walking into a very old, very dusty apothecary shop, but outdoors and with a lot more jostling elbows. You see displays of dried plants, leaves, bark, flowers, stacked in neat bundles, or spilling from baskets. There are jars and pots containing powders, pastes, and liquids of various, often vibrant colours. Little packets and paper-wrapped parcels are piled high, each promising relief from a multitude of ailments that plague the Edo populace, from stomach aches to fevers, toothaches to something mysteriously referred to as wind sickness. Life in Edo was often tough on the body. Poor sanitation, crowded living conditions, and a diet that could be monotonous for the poor meant that illness was a constant companion for many. So these medicine markets weren't just curiosities, they were essential service providers. People came here seeking remedies for everything from a minor cough to serious chronic conditions. There were no national health services here, no convenient pharmacies on every corner with a vast selection of brightly packaged pills. This was healthcare, Edo-style, and it relied heavily on traditional practices derived from centuries of accumulated knowledge, much of it adapted from Chinese medicine. Mainstream historical fact: traditional medicine in Edo, Japan, known as Kampo, was deeply influenced by Chinese medical texts and practices, incorporating herbal remedies, acupuncture, and moxibustion. Physicians and apothecaries relied on detailed knowledge of herbs and natural substances, believing health was a balance of vital energies within the body. It wasn't just about symptomatic relief, it was about restoring harmony, which sounds quite lovely, doesn't it? Until you have to drink something that tastes like boiled socks because it's balancing your humours. The vendors here might be more subdued than the fishmongers or street food sellers. Some are learned individuals, perhaps trained in specific lineages of Kampo. Others might be more like travelling salesmen with a few popular remedies. They might engage you in the conversation, asking about your symptoms, examining your tongue or pulse, if you were lucky enough to find a more learned practitioner here, and then recommending a specific mix of herbs to be brewed into a tea or a paste to be applied. You'd probably get a lengthy explanation about why this particular combination of chrysanthemum and ginger was perfect for your imbalance, which, let's be honest, would mostly fly right over your head if you weren't steeped in the philosophy. The quality of remedies varied wildly. You might find genuinely effective herbal treatments alongside absolute snake oil, sometimes literally. You had to be a discerning customer, relying on reputation, word of mouth, and perhaps a bit of desperation. It's the historical equivalent of trying to figure out if that weird supplement recommended by your aunt is actually helpful or just expensive dust. Trust was key, and finding a reputable vendor was paramount, assuming you wanted to get better and not just experience new and interesting side effects. A quirky or fringe tidbit: Among the myriad of remedies sold, you might find substances that seem bizarre or even repulsive by modern standards, such as dried animal parts like deer antlers or gallbladder tears, believed to have medicinal properties, processed minerals, or even ingredients derived from human waste, which some alchemical or folk traditions incorporated. It's a potent reminder that natural doesn't always mean appealing or safe. So while you're sniffing that interesting-looking root, just be grateful you don't have to inquire about the properties of, say, powdered beetle shells. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of traditional Kampo medicine in Edo was primarily due to its efficacy in treating common ailments within the historical context, or if it was largely a reflection of limited access to alternative forms of healing, making folk remedies and accessible herbalists the default option for the majority of the population. Was it genuinely good medicine for its time, or simply the best available medicine for most people? It's a complex question, entangled with social class, access to care, and the historical development of medical knowledge. You might notice specific stalls specializing in different types of remedies. Some might focus on external applications, plasters, poultices, ointments for skin issues, wounds, or aches. Others might sell ingredients for internal use, requiring you to go home and boil them into a potion that likely tasted like betrayal in liquid form. There would be pestles and mortars in use, grinding ingredients right there, releasing potent aromas into the air. It's a hands-on approach to pharmaceuticals, a stark contrast to blister packs and plastic bottles. Beyond the practical, there was often a spiritual or superstitious element intertwined with medicine. Amulets, charms, or specific rituals might be sold or recommended alongside the herbal remedies. Sickness could be attributed to diseases, not just to imbalances, but also to malevolent spirits or ill fortune. So you might buy a bag of herbs and a little paper charm from a nearby temple stall just to cover all your bases. It's the ultimate can't hurt, might help approach to healthcare, multiplied by a few centuries. The sheer variety is overwhelming. How did anyone know what to choose? Reputation, as mentioned, was vital. Certain areas might become known for specific types of remedies. Word would spread through the neighborhood about a particular vendor whose cough syrup actually seemed to work, or whose salve helped heal stubborn sores. It was a marketplace built on accumulated wisdom, trial and error, and perhaps a healthy dose of placebo effect. As you wander through these stalls, you get a sense of the vulnerabilities of Edo life. The constant battle against illness, the reliance on nature's bounty, and the blend of practical knowledge with mystical belief. It's a vivid picture of how a pre-modern city attempted to keep itself healthy, one bitter herbal potion at a time. Take a deep breath, carefully, avoiding that cloud of suspicious-looking powder, and appreciate the resilience required just to stay functional in this bustling, germ-filled metropolis. And maybe be thankful for modern medicine, even if it means waiting forever for your doctor's appointment. Moving on from the curious aromas of the medicinal stalls, the air changes yet again. The heavy, earthy smells of herbs and powders fade, replaced by the lighter, perhaps cleaner scent of wood, fresh straw, woven fibres, and maybe even a hint of something metallic from tools being hammered or sharpened nearby. You're entering the domain of the artisans and general goods markets, where the focus shifts from keeping the body healthy to equipping the household and dressing the person. This part of the market feels a bit different. While still bustling and full of activity, there's less of the frantic energy of the food stalls and less of the quiet intensity of the healers. Here you see people examining the weave of a fabric, testing the sharpness of a blade, or discussing the durability of a wooden bucket. It's where the practical needs of Itamu life are met. Think of it as the historical equivalent of navigating multiple aisles in a combined hardware store, textile shop and homeware outlet, all crammed into a few lively streets or squares. Displays here are varied. Bolts of cotton and silk sit alongside piles of hemp fabric. Stalls overflow with straw sandals, waraji, and wooden clogs, geta, essential footwear for navigating the city's often muddy or dusty streets. You see beautifully crafted wooden bowls, trays and boxes. There are pottery stalls with simple sturdy rice bowls and sake cups, as well as more decorative pieces. Tools for farming, fishing, cooking and crafting are laid out: sickles, knives, hammers, needles, brushes of all kinds. Everything needed to maintain a home, a trade, or simply get through the day is available here, if you have the means. The quality varies immensely, just like everywhere else in Edo. You might find exquisitely made items, lacquered wood that gleams, silk that shimmers with every step, blades honed to razor sharpness by master smiths. These would be expensive, catering to the samurai, wealthy merchants, or higher-ranking townsfolk. Right next to them, you'd find cheaper, more roughly made goods, everyday items for the masses, functional if not fancy. A simple wooden spoon is just a simple wooden spoon after all, unless you're a food blogger in 1650 trying to make it look artisan. Merchants here often specialise. One stall might sell only paper, thick sheets for writing, thin layers for screens, decorative varieties for wrapping gifts. Another might focus entirely on brushes for calligraphy or painting, each bristles carefully selected and bound. You could find vendors selling only ropes and cords, essential for tying everything from bundles of goods to kimono sashes. This specialisation meant you often had to move between different areas to find everything on your shopping list, which frankly sounds exhausting compared to Amazon Prime. Mainstream historical fact: Edo was a major centre of craft production, with a vast number of artisans specialising in various trades like woodworking, ceramics, textile weaving, metalworking, and papermaking. Many of these crafts were organised into guilds or associations, which helped regulate quality, training, and trade within the city. These guilds played a significant role in the economy and social structure, providing a framework for skilled labour and ensuring the continuation of traditional techniques. It wasn't just random people making stuff. It was often a highly organised system with a deep sense of lineage and skill. The sounds in this section are less about shouting prices and more about the ambient noise of work and transaction. The rhythmic tap of a hammer, the soft swish of fabric, the murmur of negotiation, the clatter of pottery, these are the sounds of production and trade intertwined. You might see artisans working right at their stalls, demonstrating their skills or finishing a piece. A woodworker might be carving a detail. A textile vendor might be mending a small tear, adding to the sense that these aren't just retailers, but people deeply connected to the goods they sell. Negotiation is common, especially for larger or more expensive items. Prices might be haggled over, credit extended, though risky, and deals struck with a handshake and a shared cup of tea. It's a very personal form of commerce built on trust and face-to-face interaction. No online reviews here, just the look in someone's eye and the feel of the product in your hand. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Among the common goods, you might stumble upon vendors selling items related to popular Edo period hobbies or pastimes. This could include specialised tools for gardening, a very popular pursuit, materials for tea ceremony, items for flower arranging, ikebana, or even components for building miniature models, reflecting the diverse interests of the city's residents beyond just survival and work. Imagine finding a stall dedicated solely to tiny wooden beams for building dollhouses. That's the level of detail you might encounter. Historians still argue whether the vibrant craft market scene in Edo was primarily a response to the city's massive population and their basic needs, or if it was significantly driven by the rising prosperity and consumerism of the merchant class and to urban dwellers who desired more than just necessities. Was it simply mass production for a massive city? Or was it also a reflection of growing taste and disposable income among the Edotsuko, Edokko, the native-born Edoites? It's a question about the balance between necessity and luxury in the burgeoning metropolis. You could spend a significant amount of time just browsing here. The sheer variety of items is staggering. Combs made from boxwood, mirrors made from polished metal, fans painted with intricate scenes, pipes for smoking tobacco, pouches for carrying coins or personal items, inkstones and brushes for writing. Every aspect of daily life is represented in the goods on offer. It's a material culture laid bare, showing you exactly what was valued, used and desired by the people of Edo. The atmosphere can vary depending on the specific area. Some sections might be quieter, focusing on high-end textiles or delicate ceramics. Others might be noisier and more boisterous, especially where tools or more practical items are sold, perhaps with blacksmiths nearby adding their clangorous contribution. Each type of craft often had its designated area or street, making it easier, or harder depending on how you look at it, to find what you were looking for. Need a new cooking pot? Head towards the pottery street, looking for fabric for a new kimono? Find the textile district. It's a bit like having a shopping mall where each shop is a mile apart. As you walk, the colours and textures are a feast for the eyes. The muted tones of natural fibres and wood contrast with the vibrant dyes used in textiles or the glossy finish of lacquerware. The smooth surface of polished metal sits next to the rough weave of straw. It's a tactile landscape as much as a visual one, inviting you to reach out and touch, though you probably shouldn't just grab things in someone's stall. It's also a place to see the intersection of utility and art. Even simple items like a wooden spoon or a straw sandal might have a certain elegance or craftsmanship that elevates it beyond mere function. The Edo period was known for its appreciation of aesthetics in everyday life, and you see that reflected in the goods available here. It wasn't just about what it did, but how it looked and how well it was made. A philosophy we could probably use a bit more of today. Leaving the clatter and crafting sounds of the artisan stalls behind, the atmosphere shifts again. The practical focus gives way to something a bit more vibrant, a bit more theatrical. Because these markets weren't just places to buy a fish or a bowl, they were social hubs, gathering places, and yes, stages for the impromptu performances that dotted Edo life. You might hear it before you see it, the twang of a shamisen, the rhythmic beat of a drum, or the rising cadence of a voice captivating a crowd. This is where the serious business of commerce bumps right up against the equally serious business of entertaining a populace that, despite its many hardships, knew how to appreciate a good show. Think of it as the original street performance scene, complete with its own unique Edo flavour. Gathered in a small open space, perhaps near a large gate or at a crossroads within the market, you see a crowd forming. Pushing your way gently through the throng, you find the source of the sound. Maybe it's a street musician, fingers flying over the strings of a shamisen, singing a popular tune or a bawdy ballad about Edo life. Their voice might be rough but full of character, telling stories or painting pictures with music in a way that speaks directly to the listeners gathered around. Or perhaps it's a flute player, producing haunting or lively melodies that drift above the general market noise. Further along, you might stumble upon a group watching an acrobat or a juggler. Balls, knives, probably blunt hopefully, or other objects soar through the air, caught and tossed with practiced ease. The performer, perhaps dressed in brightly coloured or slightly tattered clothing, executes flips, tumbles or balancing acts that defy gravity and basic common sense. The crowd gasps, cheers, and tosses small coins or bits of food into a hat or basket placed on the ground. It's raw, immediate entertainment, no tickets required, just the willingness to stand and watch and maybe contribute a few mon. Then there are the storytellers. These were incredibly popular figures in Edo, bringing news, gossip, and ancient tales to life. A man, it was usually a man, though not exclusively, might sit on a small platform or simply stand on a box, using nothing but his voice, rhythm, and perhaps a fan or a wooden clapper to create entire worlds. This could be rakugo, the comedic monologue with a twist ending, or kodan, dramatic historical recitations filled with heroes and villains. The storyteller's face contorts with emotion. His voice rises and falls, drawing you into the narrative as effectively as any modern podcast. Probably more so because you can actually see the spittle flying. You might even encounter more unusual acts. Travelling performers showcasing trained animals, a monkey, doing tricks perhaps, displays of mechanical puppets, karakuri demonstrating intricate movements, or even public demonstrations of martial arts or sword forms, though these might be more common on temple grounds or specific festival days. The variety was immense, reflecting the diverse tastes and curiosities of the Edoites. Mainstream historical fact: public performances, ranging from music and dance to storytelling and acrobatics, were a vital part of urban culture in the Edo period. These entertainers, often considered part of the transient population, operated in public spaces like markets, temple precincts, and festival grounds, providing accessible entertainment for people of all social strata, excluding, of course, the most isolated samurai or the very poorest who couldn't spare a moment to watch. The sounds of these performances add another layer to the market's symphony. The sharp crack of a storyteller's clapper, the joyous or sometimes sorrowful notes of a shamisen, the gasps and laughter of the audience. These are sounds of leisure and community, a brief respite from the constant hustle of buying and selling. It's a reminder that markets weren't just economic engines, but vital social spaces where people connected, exchanged information and gossip, and shared cultural experiences. It was like YouTube before YouTube, but with actual fresh air and questionable hygiene. You might also see less formal performances, perhaps someone demonstrating a new type of tool or gadget, drawing a crowd with their pitch and sill, or maybe a calligrapher creating beautiful characters on request. Their brushstrokes a fascinating spectacle in themselves. Even the interactions between vendors and customers could sometimes take on a theatrical quality, full of playful banter and exaggerated gestures, a quirky or fringe tidbit. Among the travelling performers were sometimes individuals known as Gamma no Abura Uri, or toad oil sellers. These were often skilled orators who would put on a show demonstrating the supposed efficacy of their toad oil salve, often just regular grease with some herbs mixed in, by performing feats like cutting their own skin using a cleverly blunted blade, and then miraculously healing it with the oil. It was part medicine show, part street magic, and entirely geared towards separating people from their money with a good story and some sleight of hand. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of street entertainment in Edo's markets was primarily a deliberate policy by the shogunate to distract the populace from political matters with diversions, or a natural evolution of urban social life driven by supply and demand for entertainment among a large, concentrated population. Was it a form of social control, keeping people busy and amused? Or was it simply capitalism providing what people wanted, like cat videos today? Watching these performances, you get a sense of the shared cultural references of the time. Jokes land because everyone understands the context. Stories resonate because they tap into common experiences or shared histories. Music evokes familiar emotions. It's a vibrant, living culture being performed right in front of you, not locked away in theatres or elite salons. It's the public square in action before we had them mostly online. Standing there, mesmerised by a skilled juggler or hanging on every word of a storyteller, you might almost forget you're in a bustling market. The noise of the surrounding commerce fades slightly as the crowd focuses on the spectacle. It's a temporary escape, a moment of shared wonder or laughter in the midst of daily life. And maybe, just maybe, you feel a little lighter, a little more connected to the pulse of this incredible city. The sheer energy of these performers is captivating. They work for tips, for attention, for the love of their craft. They rely on their ability to draw and hold a crowd, to make someone pause in their busy day and offer a few mon in appreciation. It's a tough way to make a living, exposed to the elements and competing with 1,000 other distractions. But when they nail a punchline or land a difficult trick, the connection between performer and audience is palpable. It's the original hustle, before we use the term for selling digital courses. Moving on from the lively circles of performers, the market texture shifts subtly once more. The clamour of applause and dramatic intonation fades, replaced by a different kind of human sound, the low murmur of conversation, the focused snip of scissors, the scratch of a pen. You find yourself drifting towards areas where the commerce isn't about goods but about services. These markets weren't just retail zones, they were also service centres, places where you could get things done amidst the buying and selling. Imagine needing a quick haircut or shave. Right there, possibly under a makeshift awning, or just in an open spot with a stool, sits a barber. He's got his tools laid out. Razors, combs, perhaps a small brazier for heating water or tools, and a basin. The air around him carries the faint, clean scent of soap, or perhaps a herbal rinse, a welcome contrast to the general market smells. You watch as he expertly works on a customer, the steel glinting, the hair falling away in dark swathes onto the ground. Yes, right onto the ground, waste disposal wasn't quite the same. Barbers in Edo were more than just haircutters. They were often repositories of gossip and local news, much like bartenders or taxi drivers today. Sitting in their chair, you'd hear the latest rumours, find out who was doing what, and maybe even get a tip on where to find the best deal on rice or textile elsewhere in the market. It was a transaction of both grooming and information exchange, a kind of low-tech social network node. And yes, they'd shave your head or style it according to the latest trend if you were feeling fashionable and your hair was in good enough shape to have a trend applied to it. Many men favoured the chômage, that distinctive top knot, which required regular maintenance. Getting it done properly was crucial. A lopsided top knot could ruin your whole look, which in Edo was apparently a big deal. Nearby, you might spot a more sedentary service provider, the professional scribe or letter writer. Picture a small cell, a pot of ink, brushes of various sizes, and stacks of paper. People who were illiterate, or perhaps just had terrible handwriting, we've all been there, would approach these scribes to compose or read letters. Maybe it's a merchant dictating an order to a supplier, a person sending news to family in the countryside, or even someone needing help drafting a formal request or complaint. The scribe listens patiently, perhaps asking clarifying questions, then dips his brush and begins to paint the elegant or sometimes hurried characters onto the paper. Mainstream historical fact, professional scribes known as hitsugaki, or similar terms depending on the era and region, were essential service providers in urban centres like Edo, facilitating communication for a large segment of the population that lacked literacy or the skill for formal writing. They bridged the gap between spoken word and written record, enabling business, personal communication, and official interactions for those who couldn't write themselves. Watching a scribe work is almost a performance in itself, though a quiet one. The focused concentration on their face, the precise movements of the hand, the way the ink blossoms on the paper. It's a reminder that in an age before mass literacy and typewriters, let alone emails or text messages, imagine dictating your urgent marketplace question to a scribe. Just write, "Are you there? BTW, did you see that guy selling dried squid? LOL. Communication was a certain service, and sometimes a bottleneck. You might even get stuck behind someone dictating a particularly lengthy and dramatic love letter. Talk about awkward waiting. Yeah, no rush, just need to get a receipt copied. Take your time with the flowery poetry." Beyond these practical services, the market also catered to less tangible needs. Fortune tellers were common figures. They might set up shop with a small curtain, some esoteric charts, possibly a bird trained to pick fortunes from a pile of cards, or just their own reputation and intuition. People would consult them about business ventures, relationships, travel, or just the general uncertainties of life. Was that new vendor trustworthy? Should you invest in that shipment of sake? Will your annoying neighbor finally move away? The fortune teller would gaze intently, perhaps consult a book or read lines on a hand, offering predictions and advice for a small fee. A quirky or fringe tidbit? Some Edo fortune tellers used methods that seem bizarre to us today, including Hatsune no Tsujura, or first sound street fortunes. A fortune teller would position themselves at a busy intersection and base their prediction for a client on the very first significant sound they heard after the client asked their question. A snippet of conversation, the cry of a vendor, the call of a bird, and the interpretation of that sound was then crafted into a fortune, blending spontaneity with the teller's interpretive skills. It was like waiting for the universe to give you a sign, filtered through a possibly slightly eccentric middleman. Historians still argue whether the widespread reliance on services like fortune-telling reflected genuine spiritual belief, a lack of access to alternative forms of advice or planning, or simply the timeless human desire for reassurance and a glimpse into the future, much like consulting your horoscope or taking an online personality quiz today. Were these services truly believed to connect with destiny, or were they just part of the lively, sometimes dubious fabric of urban life? You might also see people offering simple repair services, mending a torn garment, sharpening a knife, fixing a broken sandal strap. Small everyday problems could be solved right there on the spot, keeping goods in use and reducing waste, unlike our disposable culture where a broken strap means buying new shoes. These repairers often worked with simple tools, their skill honed over years of practice, turning worn-out items back into serviceable ones. It was a practical necessity in a society where resources were valued and replacement wasn't always easy or affordable. The sheer variety of services available within the market is striking. It speaks to a certain self-sufficiency of these urban hubs. You didn't necessarily need to go to a specialized shop for every little thing. Many needs could be met right here, surrounded by the noise and energy of commerce. It's a microcosm of the city itself, a place where almost anything could be found or done if you knew where to look and had a few months to spare. And perhaps, if you were lucky, the barber wouldn't give you a wonky top knot. As you move past the quiet hum of the scribe and the rhythmic snip of the barber's scissors, a new wave of sensory input washes over you, a much more immediate and frankly mouth-watering one. The air begins to thicken with the aromas of cooking, savoury, sweet, sometimes a little smoky. This is the section devoted to satisfying the rumbling stomach, the part of the market dedicated to food and drink, the original fast food district Edo style. The visual spectacle is just as inviting. Vendors are grilling, frying, boiling and steaming right out in the open. Skewers sizzle over glowing coals, sending plumes of fragrant smoke into the air. Pots bubble merrily, promising warm, comforting broth. Baskets are piled high with vibrant fruits and vegetables, while wooden trays display neatly arranged sweets or rice cakes. The colours are vivid, the deep brown char on grilled eel, the bright green of fresh herbs, the inviting beige of steaming dumplings. It's a feast for the eyes even before you consider putting anything in your mouth. And the sounds, the cheerful call of a vendor advertising their specialty, the rhythmic thwack thwack of someone pounding mochi, that glutinous rice treat, the hiss and sputter of oil, the gentle clatter of bowls and chopsticks. It's a symphony of sustenance, a soundtrack composed of hunger and satisfaction. You might even hear a little tune being whistled by a particularly happy customer who just got their hands on a delicious snack. Think about the variety. You're not just getting plain rice here, there are yakitori-like skewers, chicken maybe or vegetables, brushed with a sweet soy glaze and grilled until slightly crispy and juicy. There are boiled items like odon, a warming stew with various ingredients like daikon radish, eggs, and fish cakes simmering in a dashi broth. Perfect for a chilly day, or maybe just to soothe your soul after navigating the crowds. Noodles are, of course, a staple. You see vendors preparing soba, buckwheat noodles, or udon, thicker wheat noodles, lived in hot broth or chilled with a dipping sauce. It's quick, it's filling, and it hits the spot. Imagine slurping down a bowl of hot soba right there in the market bustle. It's the ancient equivalent of grabbing a quick ramen from a street cart in a busy modern city, except probably healthier, or at least less likely to involve questionable mystery meat. Although, let's be honest, you're still eating food prepared outside without modern refrigeration, so maybe keep that gut feeling in mind. Then there are the sweets. Oh, the sweets. Little mochi balls dusted with kinako, roasted soybean flour, or covered in sweet bean paste, anko, dango on a stick, chewy and often glazed with a sweet soy sauce. Seasonal treats made from rice flour and sugar shaped into beautiful forms. These aren't the overly sugary, chemically flavoured candies you might find today. These are treats often based on natural sweetness from beans or grains, simple but incredibly satisfying. A little sweet pick-me-up to fuel your exploration. Mainstream historical fact, street food, known collectively by terms like yatemeshi, stall food, was a crucial part of Edo's culinary landscape, providing quick, affordable meals and snacks to the vast number of single male labourers and transient workers who made up a significant portion of the city's population and often lacked cooking facilities. These stalls were vital for feeding the city's engine, offering sustenance on the go and contributing to the vibrant street life. Hydration is also key, especially if you've been wandering for a while. You can get water, though its purity might be a topic for another day. Tea, usually simple green tea, is commonly available and refreshing. And then there's sake. While sake houses existed, you could also find vendors offering cups of warmed or chilled sake, a social lubricant and a way to relax amidst the noise. Maybe a tiny cup after a long day haggling, just to take the edge off. Don't get too relaxed though, you still have to find your way home. You notice a small stall selling something you can't quite identify by sight, but the smell is intriguing, a little smoky, a little pungent. It turns out to be grilled skewers of small fish, or perhaps internal organs. Not for the faint of heart, but a popular and protein-rich snack for the less squeamish. It's a reminder that street food covered a wide spectrum, from comforting classics to adventurous eats. You might pass on that particular offering politely and look for the mochi instead. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Among the more unusual street foods historians believe were sold in Edo were items made from whale meat, including cartilage and blubber, grilled or boiled. While whale was eaten in coastal areas of Japan for centuries, its appearance as street food in urban Edo highlights the diverse and sometimes surprising culinary habits driven by availability and demand, reflecting the city's access to coastal resources despite being inland from the main whaling grounds. Historians still argue whether the widespread popularity of street food in Edo primarily reflected the convenience needed by a busy, transient population, or if it also indicated a growing culinary culture among the common townsfolk who enjoyed eating out and sampling different flavours beyond their humble home cooking. Was it necessity or burgeoning leisure? Perhaps a bit of both, like grabbing takeout because you're tired after work, but also because you genuinely enjoy that specific restaurant's food. The density of these food stalls is part of their charm and chaos. They are often clustered together, each vying for attention with calls and aromas. You might find yourself navigating narrow aisles between cooking fires, sidestepping drips or spills, watch your kimono, and trying to make your choice from a dozen tempting options. It's not a serene dining experience, but it's certainly a lively one. And the immediacy of it, seeing the food cooked right in front of you, adds a layer of trust, or at least confidence in its freshness, that you wouldn't get otherwise. Unless, of course, you saw something suspicious happen during the cooking process, in which case you'd politely move along to the next vendor, maybe pretending you just remembered you're terribly allergic to, well, grilled mystery organs. Leaving behind the lingering smells of grilled eel and the sweet scent of mochi, you drift further into the labyrinthine alleys of the market. The sensory landscape shifts again. The clamour of food vendors begins to recede, replaced by different sounds, the rhythmic tapping of a hammer, the gentle whir of a spindle, the rustle of fabric. You're moving into the sections dedicated not just to consumption, but to creation and maintenance, the areas where daily life's necessities and simple comforts are crafted and sold. Here the stalls feel perhaps a little more permanent than the mobile food carts, sometimes even small open-fronted shops. The goods on display are less ephemeral than a bowl of noodles. They are things meant to last, tools for work, items for the home, clothing for the back. The visual palette becomes more muted, focusing on natural materials, the gleam of polished wood, the sturdy weave of hemp or cotton, the dull shine of metal tools. You pass by a vendor specializing in ropes and cords. Piles of various thicknesses and lengths are stacked neatly, their natural fibers giving off a faint earthy smell. Ropes were essential in Edo for building, for tying bundles, for pulling carts, even for restraining criminals. Hopefully you won't need that last one today. The vendor demonstrates the strength of a thick cord with a practiced hand, showing a potential customer how to tie a secure knot. It's a simple craft, but a vital one, the kind of thing you take for granted until you really need it. Next door, someone is selling baskets and woven containers. From sturdy, large baskets for carrying goods to delicate, smaller ones for storing household items, they are all made from bamboo or reeds, skillfully woven into intricate patterns. The air here smells faintly of dried plant fibers. You might run your hand over the smooth, cool surface of a finished basket, admiring the patience and skill that went into its creation. These weren't just decorative items, they were the Tupperware and storage bins of Edo, indispensable for transporting and organizing everything from food to laundry. Further along, you encounter a blacksmith's small temporary setup or a tool vendor. The scent of metal, maybe a faint whiff of charcoal smoke from nearby, hangs in the air. On display are simple but essential tools. Hammers, chisels, saws, knives. Most might be new, others are brought in for sharpening or repair. You hear the scrape of a whetstone as a knife blade is brought back to a keen edge. The tools look solid, functional, designed for purpose rather than flash. Think of the difference between a mass-produced plastic widget and a hand-forged iron nail. These tools have that kind of honest, enduring quality. You probably wouldn't want to carry a heavy hammer home today, but it's fascinating to see the instruments that built and maintained this massive city. Textiles are another major draw. Stacks of folded cloth, bolts of fabric, and finished garments are displayed. The colours are often natural dyes, indigo blues, earthy browns, muted greens and creams, punctuated occasionally by brighter reds or purples if you're looking at higher-end goods. The textures vary widely, from rough, sturdy hemp, suitable for work clothes, to softer cottons, and perhaps even some silk for those who could afford it. Vendors might be unravelling a bolt to show a customer the pattern or the quality of the weave. The air is soft here, smelling of cloth and maybe a hint of starch. Imagine picking up a piece of indigo-dyed cotton, feeling its texture, and thinking about the journey it took from field to market stall. It makes you appreciate the complexity of even simple historical clothing. Mainstream historical fact. Edo was a major centre for textile production and trade, particularly known for cotton fabrics and later, more elaborate silks and patterned goods. The market played a crucial role in distributing these textiles, supplying cloth to everyone from labourers needing durable workwear to wealthy merchants purchasing fine kimonos, illustrating the tiered nature of consumption within the city. You might pause by a vendor selling brushes, calligraphy brushes of various sizes, cleaning brushes, perhaps even cosmetic brushes. The delicate tips of the calligraphy brushes are aligned perfectly, looking almost like works of art themselves. The vendor might dip a brush in water and demonstrate its flexibility on a piece of paper, leaving a dark, elegant stroke. It's a small item, but connected to the deep cultural significance of writing and art in Japan. It makes you wonder who would be buying these: a scholar, a merchant keeping accounts, a hopeful artist? Then there are the vendors selling items for everyday household use. Small ceramic bowls, wooden chopsticks, lacquered ware trays, paper lanterns, umbrellas. These aren't the fancy items you'd find in specialty shops in wealthier districts, but durable, affordable goods for the average Edo resident. You see simple, unadorned rice bowls and sturdy wooden buckets. Rolls of thick paper. These are the quiet heroes of daily life, the items used over and over without a second thought. Seeing them laid out reminds you that beyond the spectacle and the food, the market was fundamentally about providing the basic necessities for a city teeming with people. A quirky or fringe tidbit. Among the seemingly mundane items sold were specific types of paper used for various purposes, including thick, durable paper for reinforcing clothing, oiled paper for umbrellas and lanterns, and even special toilet paper, though not in the modern roll form, often made from recycled paper, highlighting an early form of resourcefulness and recycling within the busy urban environment. Historians still argue whether the quality and variety of goods available in the general markets of Edo truly reflected the changing economic status of the common townsfolk, or if the most desirable and innovative items remained primarily accessible only to the samurai, wealthy merchants, and elite classes who could afford to shop in more exclusive establishments. Was the market a driver of rising living standards, or just a place to buy necessities for most? You see a vendor demonstrating a new kind of lamp wick, claiming it burn longer and brighter, or perhaps someone selling small, intricately carved wooden combs. These are not just practical items, they show a touch of craftsmanship, a little bit of artistry applied to the everyday. It's these small details that make the market feel truly alive, the human element of people making things with their hands and selling them to others who need or simply appreciate them. It's a far cry from clicking add to cart online. Here you can touch, inspect, and even haggle a little if you're feeling brave and know the language. But maybe you just want to observe the gentle rhythm of commerce in this part of the market, the quiet interactions between vendor and buyer, focused on the tangible reality of the goods themselves. It's a different kind of energy than the boisterous food stalls, perhaps more grounded, more focused on the long haul of everyday life. The rhythmic tapping and rustling fades behind you as you finally begin to move towards the edge of the bustling market district. The crowds, though still present, start to thin slightly, and the cacophony of sounds and smells begins to soften around the edges. You've navigated the main thoroughfares, explored the food stalls, examined the goods for sale, and perhaps even haggled or wisely decided not to. The energy level changes now. It's less about the peak of commerce and more about the gradual return to the quieter pulse of the city as day wears on. You might feel a sense of relief or perhaps a touch of fatigue from the sensory overload. Your feet might ache a little from walking the uneven paths and standing to observe the vendors. You might pat your pockets to check if your meager coin purse is still where it should be, a small, anxious habit that transcends centuries. The sun is beginning to dip lower, casting longer shadows down the narrow lanes you follow, a visual cue that the day's peak activity is passing. As you exit the main market thoroughfares, you pass by smaller, more specialized shops that line the streets leading away. These aren't the transient stalls of the market proper, but permanent establishments built with more substantial materials. There might be a fan maker's shop displaying beautifully painted paper and bamboo fans, or perhaps a small print shop where woodblock prints are being carefully pulled from carved blocks, the smell of ink faint on the air. These places cater to a slightly different clientele, or offer goods that require a more stable environment than a temporary stall. The smells change again. Maybe the scent of cypress wood from a cooper's shop making tubs and buckets, or the subtle perfume wafting from a shop selling cosmetics and hairpins. These transition zones between the general market and the residential or more specialized commercial areas of Edo are interesting in themselves, acting as a buffer and distribution point. You see people carrying bundles of goods purchased in the market, heading home or to their own businesses. A farmer hauling empty baskets, a merchant's apprentice struggling with a large bolt of cloth, a housewife balancing purchases wrapped in paper. Mainstream historical fact, as Edo grew, specialized districts and permanent shops became increasingly common outside the main market areas, offering goods and services like carpentry, metalworking, specific types of clothing, or even lending money, signifying a maturing and diversifying urban economy beyond basic daily market transactions. You might notice the types of people you see also subtly shift. Fewer day labourers, perhaps more people who look like they run their own small businesses or work in specific crafts. The air feels a little less chaotic, more focused. It's like the difference between a busy town square during a festival and the quieter side streets. Both are part of the same place, but with a different tempo. You can almost hear your own thoughts again now that the market's roar is fading. As you walk, you reflect on the sheer volume of activity you witnessed. How did this immense system work? How did the goods get here? How were prices set? Who regulated it all? Was it pure chaos, or was there an unseen order? A quirky or fringe tidbit. Among the many types of goods and services found in and around the Edo markets were ear cleaners, who offered to clean customers' ears right there in the open. A service that might seem odd today, but was a recognized, albeit perhaps somewhat unsanitary, trade at the time. Historians still argue whether the shogunate's attempts to control commerce and regulate prices in the Edo markets were genuinely effective in stabilizing the economy and preventing exploitation, or if the sheer scale and organic nature of the market allowed informal networks and supply and demand dynamics to largely operate independently of official decree. You might pass a small temporary performance space set up on a corner, perhaps a storyteller recounting tales from history or legend, or a street musician playing a simple tune on a shamisen. These little pockets of entertainment provided a brief respite from the commercial grind, reminding you that life in Edo wasn't all about buying and selling. You could pause for a moment, letting the gentle notes or the cadence of the storyteller's voice wash over you, another layer in the rich tapestry of the city's daily life. The light continues to fade, and shopkeepers begin to prepare for closing, pulling down the shutters or packing away smaller items. The smells of dinner cooking drift from nearby homes and eating establishments, a mix of miso soup, grilled fish, simmering vegetables. It's a comforting domestic contrast to the earlier commercial scents. You've had your fill of the market for today, perhaps for a while. It's been fascinating, overwhelming, and undeniably eye-opening. You're nearing the edge of the district now. The sounds are fewer, softer. The visuals are less overwhelming. You can see the sky more clearly overhead as you move away from the dense, overhanging roofs and stalls. It feels like emerging from a busy, buzzing hive into the quieter evening air. You take a deep breath, letting the scent of damp earth and distant cooking replace the sharper market smells. The journey through the markets of Edo is coming to a close for tonight. You've walked miles, seen thousands of faces, heard countless shouts and murmurs, and experienced a world incredibly different from your own, yet fundamentally human in its drive to trade, connect, and simply live. It's a place that existed vibrantly centuries ago, teeming with life, ambition, and the simple pursuit of making a living. And for a little while you were a part of it. The images begin to soften now, like watercolours fading on paper. The sharp edges of the stalls, the bright colours of the fabrics, the steam from the food, they blur into a gentler panorama in your mind. The clamour of the crowds recedes into a distant hum, like waves on a far-off shore. Your body is ready to rest, and your mind is ready to settle. You are no longer walking the dusty paths of Edo's markets. You are here, safe and warm, wherever you may be. The sounds you hear now are the familiar ones of your own space, the quiet rhythm of your own breathing, maybe the gentle whir of that fan we talked about earlier. Let the remnants of the day's journey through history drift away like smoke. There's nothing more to do, nothing more to see, nothing more to think about. Just allow yourself to sink deeper into the comfort of your bed, the soft pillows, the warm blankets, the markets of Edo, the bustling crowds, the smells of eel and indigo, the tapping hammers and woven baskets. They were real, and for a moment you were there. But now, that journey is complete. It's time to let your mind quieten, your body relax, and simply sleep.